Blastwave. You love him, you hate him, or you've never even heard of him. This is Blastwave, the 1-pound combat robot I've been taking to competitions all around North America since 2019. In that time, it's had some performances, and even managed to do some things, such as get destroyed in 2019, and get destroyed in 2021, and even get destroyed in 2023. However, version 5, which I first built in 2024, this version managed to do pretty well at a competition in July, even managing to get 3rd place. I still had some upgrades that I needed to make though, and I had only a month to do it. I'm Caden here with Campbell Electronics, and let me show you the upgrades I made and how they performed. If you haven't seen Blastwave 5, check out the video that I have linked in the description because that goes over the entire design process and how it performed at that July competition. But there were a few things that I needed to improve, namely the weapon belt. The specific type of belt I was using was an O-ring, like the kind you get from the hardware store for your sink. I was using this because it would slip when I hit something and protect the motor from that shock. The main problem that this belt type had was friction. As the friction caused the belt to heat up, it would stretch out and could fall off the pulley and end up rendering the whole weapon assembly useless. In Blastwave's last fight at QuadCon against Pipsqueak, their horizontal spinner was able to get under the belt and get all tangled up. This ended up requiring an unstick and could potentially lead to a disqualification if it happened more often. The goal for Blastwave 5.5 was to fix both of these issues and hopefully not cause any new ones. Thankfully, the solution to all my belt troubles was simple. Replace the O-ring with a flipped timing belt. Basically, ignore the teeth and run it on the flat side. This still allows plenty of slip to protect the motor and makes the pulleys much easier to make. This used to be a much more common method of power transmission in these small bots, but seems to have fallen out of fashion lately. This helps solve a bunch of problems all at once. The belt is flatter, so it's less likely to get grabbed by a horizontal blade, and it doesn't stretch nearly as much due to having fibers running around the hoop. In order to put that into practice, I'd need to machine new drums and pulleys, but that was no big deal, I've done it before. The belt sits deeper within the drum, which should net me slightly higher RPMs from the smaller diameter pulley, along with even more protection from horizontals. I also took this opportunity to add some lock washers a la the FingerTech beater bar under the impacting teeth, which should net me about an 1/8 inch more reach and ever so slightly higher tip speeds. I hope the combination of these two things would allow me to clip wedges and forks more easily and increase my damage output. The one downside to the new pulley system was that the belt couldn't flex as much as before, so it would be pulling the weapon motor and flexing the TPU plastic chassis even more than before. My solution to this was to put a small carbon fiber plate in the side of the chassis. This would be tied into the wheel axle standoff and the rear motors for support and should rigidize that whole side of the chassis. I did some spin-up tests the night before I was supposed to leave for the competition, and I noticed that the thrust bearings were actually impeding spin-up. I think the flex in the chassis from the higher belt tension was compressing the weapon mounts and squishing the drum. Taking the thrust bearings out let me spin up more easily, so I ended up just sending it without them. However, that would not be the only problem that I would be seeing in the days before the event. These are the Hobby King Viking motors. These were the motors that I'd used on every version of Blastwave before. These are the Hobby King Viking motors, which you can't get anymore. They worked really well, and I was really happy with them. They're small, they're light, they're chill, they're cool. I like them. However, like all Vikings, one day they're going to fall in battle. Or maybe not in battle. Maybe they managed to make it home after a long campaign across the seas of the whatever, and to go pillage Ireland. But what this meant is that now I was down to only one motor. And when you have a fallen Viking warrior, you have to give them a proper send-off. Anyways, the motors were pretty much all dead. I have a hunch it was the phase wire, which the brushless motors have 3 wires, and if they're not all connected, the motor doesn't work. The reason I think this is because the motors would just sort of stutter and not actually start spinning, which is a common symptom of a phase wire disconnection. I'm not sure how the phase wires got disconnected. My best guess is that the extra squish from the TPU chassis allowed the screws to screw farther in than I was anticipating and touch the phase coils on the inside of the motor and do some damage there, but I'm not really sure. However, I did still have one motor left, and I was going to make the most of it and fight as much as I could at the Armory. So let's see how that went. Blastwave's first fight of the day was against Chaotic Rampage, a hub motor vertical spinner. Let's see how that fight went.
3, 2, 1, go! Oh! That's an unstick, right? Yep. 3, 2, 1, go! Playing something right. Oh, are you kidding me? Alright. How does it tap out?
Blastwave won that match mostly by not getting stuck. Chaotic Rampage did get a hit on my front right wheel, which didn't seem to meaningfully affect drive. However, this was the end of that last weapon motor. It was working fine up until Chaotic Rampage got stuck for the first time, and I spun down my weapon for the safe unstick. And then it just never came back. I'm not sure exactly what would have caused this, but it did mean that I was all out of weapon motors. It's a weird size for ant weight motors, so I couldn't just borrow one from anyone else there. Blastwave's next fight was against Wedge Issue, and since I was all out of weapon motors, I ended up just throwing on some forks from Melon Brawler, my 3-pounder. This was a Wedge versus Wedge fight where one of the wedges, Blastwave, was not designed with wedging in mind. I'm not going to show this fight in its entirety because honestly, it's kind of boring. I've been getting disillusioned with wedges lately, and this fight kind of solidified that. I'm just not having fun driving wedges anymore, and if it's not fun for me to drive it, then why go through all the effort and time and money to fight it? I am curious if I could make a wedge that would be fun to drive for me, but that's food for thought. With all that, I ended up just withdrawing Blastwave from the rest of the tournament. It just wasn't worth risking parts for a half-baked mod I wasn't enjoying driving anyways. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned for Melon Brawler's fights from the same event. There are more of them, and they are all pretty kinetic, so it should be a lot of fun. Bye-bye!